I've been putting off making this video for a while. Hi, my name is Taylor. I'm an artist, and I have been in a quagmire, swirling vortex, sinkhole, choose your flavor, of depression for probably the last 8 years plus of my life. Typically, my videos, I try to be peppy and cheerful, and this video isn't necessarily meant to be a downer, but it is going to probably be a little bit less energy. I considered not even having any cuts or anything in this, but if it really drags and is boring, then maybe I'll have a couple. We'll see what happens. This video is about mental health, my mental health. I know that's kind of a hot topic. That's not why I'm making this, just for clarity. So if you're watching this and you're curious, it's not supposed to be clickbait. I'm making this because I need to verbalize what I have been through. I need to define the walls of the prison that I placed myself in, and to say that I'm in a different place now. But I want to talk about where I was, how I got out, things like that. This video has made me kind of nervous to make because I've been on a progression of positive change. I've been trying to reshape my life and actually live my life for the last 6 months plus-ish. It's a good success. I don't want to say that I haven't, because I have, and things have been significantly better. But before that, I was alive without living, to be frank. And this means a lot to me for a couple of reasons. I mean, if you look at my channel bio, I talk about I am an artist with introspective thoughts, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. And while if you've watched my videos, some of them might be introspective regarding the creative process and how I make things, why I choose the things I do, I tend to go into over-analytical mode. But I don't really get into much analysis about myself, very briefly here and there, on the channel anyway. In real life, I do. And for the longest time in my personal life, I sort of chose to ignore my heart, my feelings, and I took solace in my brain, in my analytical things, my thinking, really my ability to ignore and push aside problems, to trudge forward, to hopefully find a way through darkness and pain. But really what it allowed me to do was to avoid the problems at hand and keep myself in the dark for many years. Again, this video is a little bit heavy, and I'm sorry. If for any reason this isn't for you and you're not interested, then you're welcome to leave, and I hope you have a good day. This isn't supposed to be a bummer. This isn't supposed to be an energy zap. What this is supposed to be is an honest conversation. My goal, one of my main goals in life, is to be genuine, is to be honest, is to not portray something that I'm not or that I wasn't. It is to have full transparency with anyone I meet, and that includes YouTube, the internet, which you might find foolish. It's a place where many people go to lie and not be themselves. And for a long time when I was on the internet, I chose to be there anonymously. I would lurk, I would be in the background, I would potentially have accounts that I wouldn't use. And social media in general isn't something I care about. Really, through making this channel, it's giving me my voice to some regard, and it's forced me to be more active on social media, not from a community, not from a conversational place, but just to help reach out and not be afraid to share the things that I care about, to show that the things I care about have validity, that they are real and true and have meaning to not only myself but to other people. And so, that's kind of why I'm doing this. I, in some way, would hope that it would be helpful to others, but if anything, I hope that it at least lets you know that it's okay to have darkness and pain in your life, in your past, in your present, and in your future, and that you can get through that. And it might be hard, and it might be an extremely long and arduous road, but there is light there, and you should not be afraid to seek it, and you should not be afraid to go after those things that you care about. For the longest time, and like I said, I am analytical, and I think about things, and I overanalyze. For those of you who have any meaning, I'm an INFJ. If that means nothing to you, that's fine, but I very much am a brain and a heart at the same time. Some people are really emotional, some people are really analytical and cerebral, and I tend to fall in the middle and strike a weird balance. Because of that, I think, at least for myself personally, I've had a hard time fitting in social circles. I'm not a guy's guy, and I'm not a girl's girl, for sake of a better term. I ride a middle line that I think people have a hard time trying to place me, but they do inevitably try to place me, and that in and of itself can be challenging. For a long time, when I was younger, I was going to say as a kid, but just in general, when I was younger in my early 20s, I was very much swayed by other people's opinions of me. If people thought one way about me significantly, it made me question my own self, because I didn't have the belief in myself. I didn't have the reference and the ability to have confidence in who I was. I wasn't as cynical, perhaps, then. I wasn't as heavy as maybe this conversation might feel, but I still lacked the ability to truly identify myself. And I think it's because I was so confused by how other people tried to identify me. For example, when I was in college, when I was young, I am a flamboyant person. If you've watched my videos, you might know that. I'm jokey and I'm generally jovial. And I'm not afraid to be artistic. Like I said, I acted for a long time. And because of those things, and sports never really mattered for me, let me clarify that. I have played sports, but generally that's not what I care about. But for a long time when I was younger, a lot of people thought that I was gay. Asked if I was gay, questioned if I was gay. And perhaps that might seem silly if someone has a lot of self-confidence and a lot of ability to hold true to themselves, but at that time I didn't. And not that I thought I was gay, because I never thought I was, and I suppose for clarity I'm not. But it made me question myself constantly. And I always had this weird question in my head of not knowing who I was or what I wanted or what I liked. And it would rear at different times, and it was extremely confusing. It was extremely almost disassociating. Like I didn't know who I was. And I guess for clarity as well, if you are, that's fantastic. Congrats for you. I have no problem with anything you like or choose to identify as at all. I tend to try to be an extremely open and understanding person, and even if I don't agree with your viewpoints in any regard, I don't mean from a sexual standpoint, I just mean in general, I typically won't be combative. I generally try to find understanding because I'm genuinely curious about a lot of things. I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of understanding for things that are beyond me, because in some capacity, those things help me understand myself. And I think a lot of people tend to shun off the things they don't understand or be aggressive or combatant against those things. And it's extremely sad. And not only is it sad for those people, but I think it's extremely sad for those people who might be like me, who might find it hard to place themselves in society, might find it hard to fit in and belong, and might find it hard to express that they are this thing or that thing, or don't like this or like that. And to be confronted with that aggression or hatred or feeling of you are other. That can be crushing. That can make you lose sight of self. You know, all this to say that in this video, I thought about a lot what I wanted to say. I have for the last few days, and I've had a lump in my throat, and I knew that's why I had to make the video, because as I said, I am in a place now where I am conquering my fears. I am addressing the things that make me feel uncomfortable, and I am trying to force myself to do those things because it's the only way that I can grow. And if I don't do those, I'm not living. And if I'm not living my life, then what am I doing? I suppose to talk about the depression that I mentioned earlier. So this topic could be a couple videos possibly, so I won't keep it too in-depth to a point, but in my early 20s, I think around 21, and for clarity, dates for me can sometimes be confusing. Time for my brain is a strange thing. I can understand a sequence of events. I can understand this happened before that, right? But as far as relating things to time can be hard. My brain tends to fall in this in-between. I have a resilience to things. I'm able to let things slide off of me. I'm able to be detached from situations, which is why I think I was able to live in a state of imprisonment for so long. But because of that, I think it's hard for me to always be present. And because of that, I think it's hard for me sometimes to keep track of real time. You know, sometimes it feels like things burn by really quickly, and I could see a person's face and it might look different to me. And I don't mean like they've shaved. I mean like they genuinely look like a different person, or they look older. That might feel weird for you to hear if your brain doesn't work that way. But mine does. So remembering exact dates, for one, like I said, can be challenging. So I suppose to say, like I said, around 21, I think, I moved to Chicago with my girlfriend at the time. And that was in the baseline of an idea to pursue acting. That became an extremely stressful and defeating time where my depression started. And not just for me, for her as well. And that relationship had its own issues that led to further depression later down the road. But in general, that is not the reason that I was depressed, and there is no blame for that person who is currently my best friend. So my point is that I lived in Chicago, and I ended up working for a dance studio. The dance studio, while fun and allowed me to be creative and expressive, was depleting for energy and time. I knew I couldn't persist with that demand and that schedule. It felt like there was no time for me to exist as a person, so I left, and then I ended up working a third shift job at Target, which wasn't anything exciting, but if you've worked third shift, at least for me, threw off my sense of time dramatically and kind of rocked my world as far as finding any time, really, when you shift your schedule that way and night becomes day and day becomes night, and it feels like you have less awake time, even more so. All this to say is that when Chicago went fully sour, and it did get bad, we moved back to Missouri in a defeated state, in a sense of loss, in a sense of failure, a lack of pride and ability and shame, really. And when that happened, my goals of acting, my dreams of acting had kind of left me. And they had kind of left me there when I was in Chicago. There's been periods in my life where I've felt like I've needed to give up things that I've cared about for the sake of relationships. Where there's been competition or jealousy or combativeness around topics, and in my head I had resigned that it wasn't for me. I had resigned that my relationship mattered more than anything, and that is what was important. When we moved back, we lived with my mom for a while, which was wonderful as far as having that opportunity to have stability immediately, but was challenging. And when we moved and found our own place, we ended up splitting up. That's its own separate issue. But all that to say is that once I was already fully resigned, lack of drive, lack of any kind of goal in my life, lack of any dream left with inside of me. Then I lost my relationship that was the only thing that I had left. And once that was gone, I had absolutely nothing. So when I moved back to Missouri, which is where I live, I got a little happier and then went further into a depression than when I was in Chicago. I completely shut down and didn't know how to really function, and I really didn't want to function. I became desperate for that relationship, and for a period I held on to that idea of I had to get back to it because it was the only thing that I had left. And that created its own challenges. That definitely had its own issues, and that led me into, I guess, my job in Missouri. So when I moved back, I took a job that came along. It was for a company that I started really at like the lowest point in the company, and I worked myself up to be in a technical support role. Eventually the technical support manager, for whatever the hell that means, because if there's only one of you, are you really a manager? I had underlings at points, but not many of those points. Point being, I had nothing. I was defeated. I was low energy. I was at a point where I didn't really want to socialize. I didn't want to talk about my feelings. I didn't want to talk about my losses, my depression, even really the status of how my relationship was or ended with my family or anyone. I wanted to close down, and I didn't want to share those things because I was afraid that if I shared those things, that there would be judgment, that there would be a feeling of not understanding. And I kept it to myself. And I chose to bury my feelings in work. So I moved up the ranks in the company that I was at. And I did really well, really. But I hated every minute of it. Talking with people, so I'm introverted, if that wasn't clear. I don't think it's a requirement that you have to be introverted to create art, but I think they do go hand in hand sometimes. And talking with people brought its own sense of being drained of energy, just like acting does as well. For the sake of reference, if you've ever been in a play or a show, afterwards you're typically completely zapped of all of your energy. However, in that, there's a feeling of accomplishment and pride. And then in the job I had, there's a feeling of, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Moreover, the job that I was in was constantly faced with struggles from management, from a lack of organization and planning and follow through, and those all fell on me. So I had to deliver bad news to people. I had to essentially lie to people. And with me having a relatively strong moral compass, that grated on me. And it made me very more jaded than I was. It made me feel very upset and lost, right? Like I said earlier, I already struggled with identifying myself. So then to feel like the little self I then had to be dishonest to that person. And I had to be this other person in the sake of my job. So while I was doing well, I was making good money, I knew that I couldn't persist in that role. But I stayed in that job for 6 years. Because I didn't know what to do. Because I didn't know who I was. And I didn't know how I could be anyone else. Because the longer that I stayed, I lost more of me. And the art that I cared for, I would go back and I would try to do it, but I couldn't finish projects. I couldn't make YouTube videos. I felt like I couldn't do anything right. I felt like I couldn't do anything that I was proud of. That I couldn't be proud of myself. That nobody would ever be proud of me. And that was hard. That was hard, but I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to face the problem. As I said, I'm good at suppressing my feelings for the sake of my brain. So I pushed them down and I didn't talk about them. And my brain went on an autopilot. I didn't socialize. I really didn't do anything. I saw my family for events that I didn't like going to because I was always the single, quiet person. Really. Now, when there's kids, it's easier for me. It's easier for me to be myself around a kid because there's not judgment. Not really. They'll say things, but they're not as jaded and stuck in their ways, and it's easy to be yourself there. So I've always felt comfortable around kids. But again, I struggle to fit in, and that's even true with my family. You know, my family supports me and loves me and is there if I were to need them. But we're not the same. I don't think we value necessarily the same things, or we think the same way, or we have the same priorities. Like I said, I'm 30, I'm single, I have no kids. I make YouTube videos. And I quit my job with no prospect of a new one. So life can be lonely. And sometimes that's good. You know, while I pushed my feelings away, I was very cognizant of the fact that I was isolating myself. I was cognizant of the fact that I had been alone without a relationship for a long time. And at first, I really liked that idea to some extent. My relationship that I was in had lasted about 5 to 6 years, something like that. And before that, I was in a 3-year relationship and immediately got into this one. So once my relationships ended, not only did I not know who I was and what to do, but I fundamentally didn't even know how to be alone. I didn't know who I was without another person. Really, I didn't know who I was with that person, but I didn't know that until later. But I kept choosing to stay alone because I needed the time, because I needed to heal. And I knew that. I could feel that within myself, that I wasn't okay, that I needed to figure things out, that I needed to take steps for myself. Now, my foolishness, I don't want to reflect a false sense of security. I don't want to mislead and make people think like you should isolate yourself because you shouldn't isolate yourself. I think if you're struggling, then you should absolutely seek help from the people around you. And if you're truly struggling, I think it's evident that you are, as long as there are people who actually know you. And I think it's good if they reach out to you as well. Now, that's not to blame people. I wouldn't have wanted to speak about my problems if my family truly tried to directly combat those feelings. But seeking those opportunities, if you know that you're not okay, if you know that you're lost and you need a friend, that's good. That's what you should do. And that'll make things better. It will. But I didn't really do that. I didn't really want to. Again, for me, I felt like I had to dig myself out of the pit that I put myself in. I didn't want to share anything. I didn't want to ask for help because I didn't even want to talk about what my problems were. So how did I get out of that? how am I better now? After 8 years, why do I feel like I'm finally happy? When I was in this state still, I talked to my friend several times, who was my ex, and I would talk about how I wasn't happy, and I just wanted to be happy again. To just not be sad. And it's such a simple thing. But I am getting there. And how I did it is that I chose to live my life. My depression over those 6 years of working at my last job got worse for many reasons, but they obviously got worse because guess what? Fucking COVID happened, man. It happened and it extended everything, and it made you isolate more. It caused me to have my groceries delivered to my house. It caused me to have just general food delivered to my house, and it lessened even more reasons for me to leave my home. And it got to a point where I felt so nervous to leave my house if I wasn't going to work. I had to mentally prepare myself to leave my home. And it wasn't a fear of outside, for clarity. It was a fear of being seen. Because I didn't want to be seen. Because I didn't want to exist. But I eventually became so annoyed and fed up with my inability to move, my inability to do anything that I actually wanted. Because while I had given up on those things, right? I'd given up on acting. I had really given up on drawing and doing art before that. But I still drew. I still was emotive as a person. I still seemed probably normal to a lot of people in my job and normal settings. I wasn't the Grim Reaper walking around or a husk of a body. I'm sure most people didn't know that there was a problem with me at all. But I was tired of living for a life that wasn't mine. The cliche idea of you only get one life, make the most of it, was really in my head constantly. And I kept thinking that I get one life. And I'm so nervous to do anything. I'm so nervous to put myself out there, to take a risk, to try to improve myself, that I'm just living in this imprisoned state. So I chose to start moving. And it started small. It started very simply with, I'm not going to get my groceries delivered to my house. If I order food, it's not going to be all the time. Maybe once a week. And if I need food other than that, then I'll go get it. I had gained weight. I didn't go to a gym. I barely went outside. So, I started moving. I went to the gym. I got on a schedule. I started to actively participate in my life. And where my days before that were filled with constant stuffing of media into my eyes so that I didn't have to face my own reality, I chose to lessen that time and again focus on the things that I cared about. And that was art. And that was the space around me. That was getting new furniture for my home, for my bathroom, for my living room, for my kitchen. Actually spending my money that I was working for that I didn't have any need for because I never used it. Because I didn't want to have the obligation of having these things. But I wanted to live my life. So I started spending my money and I got my toys. And I got things that brought me joy. And I stopped living in this imprisoned moment. I stopped sucking myself into media that was just a divergence. But even at that point, I still felt like I was not happy because I was at my job. And I felt that even though I had more mental freedom, and I felt more myself than I had in really the last 6 to 8 years, I was still miserable because I still had to constantly be someone that I wasn't at my job. And so I quit. It wasn't as dramatic and as maybe haphazard as would make for a good story, but I had saved money. And I had saved money deliberately because I had thought about quitting for a long time and I was just too afraid to do it. I was afraid of what my family would think. I was afraid of what people would say of, "You're just quitting? What are you doing? You're not going to go right into another job?" But it eventually didn't matter anymore because I wasn't living their life. I was living my life. And in my life, I get to do what I want to do. And if I'm going to take a risk, then I'm going to take a risk for me. Because guess what? What I'm doing now without taking that risk makes me not want to live. So this video isn't to say that you should quit your job. But this video is to say that you should live your life. And if you strongly feel that you are destined for something, or you just want to try to do something, then you should do it. Because you deserve it. Because you're worth it. Because you only get one life. And it's yours. It's yours. So I've quit my job. And I'm making YouTube videos. And I'm going to try to get into voice acting. Because these are things that I've wanted to do for a really long time. And they're things that still scare me, just like making this video scared me. But I'm doing it because it's proof that I'm living my life. Because I don't have to be afraid anymore. Because every time I do something new, I feel such a sense of accomplishment. I have pride in myself again. It feels good to be me. And it can feel good to be you. So, I don't know what this video is. I don't know if it's helpful. But I hope that you choose to live your life. because it can get better. And it can be really good. And that process might be long, but it's worth it. You're worth it. So until next time. See you then.